Welcome back, everyone, to the Big Reset series where we're trying to reset the entire human race back to default settings. Now, this one is going to be the hardest jump yet. I've been both looking forward to and dreading this episode. It's so easy to get it wrong. The best framing, think of it as a metaphorical tandem skydive. I've got 30 years of jumps under my belt, and you may be stepping out of the safe, comfortable aeroplane for the first time into freefall, where gravity and causality care nothing about who you are, what you're worth, or any ideology that you subscribe to. The good news is, I've been preparing you, parts 1 and 2 with a safety briefing. So I'm going to be asking you to hold everything you've been taught at arm's length for the duration of this video. By the time we hit the ground, we'd have walked right from moment zero to now, and we'll know why we are here. The actual purpose of the human race. I don't think it'll come as a great shock. I think we just don't want to accept responsibility and embrace the grand adventure. Oh, Dad, do I have to? Can't we just have another 1,000 years of petty scrubbling first? Fine. Understanding dimensions helps us to see why we keep repeating these same patterns throughout history and we never learn. Hopefully by now your mind is doing more causal thinking, less soft abstract thinking. We're hard thinkers now, fearless of hard truths. All authoritarian snowflakery has been forever expelled. We know that being a snowflake is just a bully not getting their own way or being called out, except when snowflakes are a metaphor for the fragility of balance, or just real frozen water. Metaphors are flexible like that. We've already trained our minds to use alternate metaphors other than the mathematical kind, to crack open complex structures. When I show you a bit of metaphorical mathematical magic with quaternions, or ask you to look at the structure of a tree and see and imagine the early universe, you won't laugh me off the internet, you'll nod sagely and feel the fractal nesting clicking into place. Small bit of housekeeping before we jump. You don't need to fully understand everything in real time. Just keep these ideas suspended in the broad strip of your Mobius mind and let them stretch their legs. The vastness of it needs room, and your mind will reel and twist with discomfort, desperate to react, going against what you fundamentally understand. It's desperate to scuttle back to safer assumptions instead of holding that thought and contemplating. I'm going to ask you to swing your legs over the edge and look down into an unimaginably deep abyss just before we jump in. Your reaction will be to fight, to pull away, but that's fine. Trust the harness. I've got you. Once you safely land and see the whole thing, it cannot be unseen. Because the structure of knowledge, your mind, and the universe are all the same fractal pattern. Recognition is therefore automatic. We don't need mathematical proofs. Your subconscious has been screaming the answers at you through metaphor for years. The echoes were everywhere, whispering from every corner. Just out of focus, clouded, sometimes cross-wired. We're just bringing it all into focus. Our current view of reality is heavily biased on precise mathematical metaphors that fool us into a sense of stability. A universe seemingly governed by constants. This is just religion wearing a tweed suit with elbow patches. Embracing total instability and uncertainty is critical here. Letting go of precise metaphor. Me peeling your fingers off the imagined security they provide so that you can let go and jump. To recap our journey so far, we've reset God, the soul, heaven and hell, good and evil being just utter stupidity with a better marketing team, the dual-edged Mobius mind, sleep, life, death, gayness, race, gender, liberalism, extremism, authoritarianism, the mental prison that is compartmentalization. To understand the universe, we have to first understand ourselves, all the quirks, perception, bias, why we do the things we do, and the traps we fall into. Now we go bigger, so buckle in. Let's have a refresher on our classic view of dimensions. It's the warped perspective that we're actually taught.
Most people think of dimensions as directions: left, right, forward and back, up and down, and maybe time as well if we're feeling generous. This framing is comfortable because it preserves the idea that reality is fundamentally stable, and that higher dimensions are simply extensions of what we already know. But that assumption is completely wrong. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to question everything you thought you knew about the universe. With each new dimension that we explore, it'll become clearer to you that the physical laws that bind us are not universal. They're local, conditional, dependent on the fact that we're trapped in the third dimension. But let's not get ahead of ourselves now. But to understand higher dimensions, we must first understand the most basic of them, the first and second dimensions. A one-dimensional world is a line. It has length, but nothing else. No width, no depth, no concept of around or beside. The only movement that exists is forward and backward. To trap a one-dimensional object, you only need two lines, one in front and the other behind. That alone completely traps the object. But a two-dimensional object can simply step to the left or the right to escape this prison. In two dimensions, we roughly start to see the world as we know it taking shape. Length and width forms a plane. You get shapes like squares and circles. The concepts of beside and around, they start to make sense. But depth is still missing, and that absence carries consequences that are easy to overlook when you don't think too deeply about them. In a two-dimensional world, nothing has an interior in the way that we understand it. Everything is defined by its outline. A body is not a volume, but it's a border. A creature sees only edges, never what lies within another being, no matter how close it gets. From inside that world, this feels normal. It's complete. It's sufficient. Up until something looks down on it. Now, a three-dimensional observer, like us, viewing a two-dimensional plane, instantly destroys this illusion of privacy. Every internal structure is visible at once. Hearts, organs, mechanisms, all...
Okay, so let's get into that straight away. One-dimensional objects, two-dimensional creatures. They're everywhere. But spot the problem already. It opens at dimension 1. Where's dimension 0? It's conveniently absent because 0 is mathematically inconvenient. But we know it absolutely exists. Even an abstract tool like mathematics can't ignore it. Anything to the power 0 possessing zero dimensionality equals 1. We're all taught this in school. Meaning it is something, not nothing. A paradox. This includes 0 itself, so 0 to the power 0 equals 1. To the power what? To the power 0? Both sides equal 1, but they clearly aren't the same thing. It's just contradicted itself at its own foundations. How can 0 and 1 be the same fundamental structure? If you can't go from 0 to 1, then how can you get to any other number? Amazingly, maths is standing up and announcing, "Hey guys, I'm just letting you know I'm non-binary." A self-contradicting expression, like somebody walking up to you with a perfect accent and inflection and saying, "All right, mate, I don't speak English." It's not. That's not a glitch in reality. That's a glitch in the tool. We build mathematics inside our four-dimensional minds, where time gets to be an optional coordinate. We can tack it on for convenience wherever we feel like it, but in the real universe, time isn't optional. It's the flow that holds the whole structure together. Numbers don't just have a direction, they have a speed at which they can manifest. But we've been ignoring that speed for centuries. What is the speed of time? A lovely chap called Jacob Bernoulli already worked this out. My second favourite mathematician due to his work on derangement. He just didn't know it. He was messing around with compound interest. Imagine a bank gives you 100% interest on £1 over any time period. It could be a year, a second, a blank second, it doesn't matter. And the deal you get pays out an infinite number of times during that period rather than just once at the end. The number you get is not infinity, it converges to around £2.718. A transcendental number with digits running off forever. We now call it Euler's number, E. It's on every calculator on the planet because we need it for absolutely everything. Much like time itself. It's been screaming at us for centuries to wake up. We just weren't listening. Too busy treating time as a coordinate instead of a compounding flow. Bernoulli accidentally discovered the speed of time. Divide any time period by infinity and you get the maximum rate at which anything can compound on itself. That's the universe's tick rate. The zero dimension flips between states 1 and 0, action and rest at the speed of E. Because E describes curvature, this is also why we mistakenly think space-time is curved. It isn't bending, it's adapting at speed E. Roughly 10 to the power 100 times per second inside your body. A Google of time tips per second just to maintain you. Now tell me how insignificant you are. wait until you see just how much trouble the universe went to in order to create and maintain you. And this is also why transcendentals like E and pi keep showing up everywhere that matters. They're evidence that we live in an adaptive reality, an emergent, never-ending tuning process. If E is the ratio dictating how quickly zero-dimensional static energy can reproduce itself for the next action, pi is the ratio between one and two-dimensional action. In an adaptive reality, things can always get better because transcendentals can never be perfectly achieved. The tuning never ends. So, cosmological evolution, biological evolution, free will. If you move your arm, the universe is now adapting to that ripple forever. No action can be undone. This creates the illusion our minds build into the perceived forward flow of time. It's the direction of action, the direction of causality. After an action, there's a reaction, and that reaction continues forever. So what are we actually looking at when we look at the dark void of space, the space in between everything? This is the challenge, not just in ignoring what we're taught, but ignoring our own perception of space we use every minute of every day. Removing it from the picture entirely, this is incredibly difficult if you haven't practiced. It's taken me 3 decades to perfect. So empty space is not three-dimensional space. Only matter has 3 or more dimensions. The 3 dimensions our mind project over reality make it easier for us to find our wallet or calculate the trajectory of a rocket to the moon. But what you're really looking at when you look at the void is the 0th and 1st dimensions, stabilized into a 3D area by sheer omnidirectionality. They don't truly have 3 dimensions. You have 0, static, and 1, the flow of time. That dark energy in empty space from quantum field theory, the background fizz that we keep mentioning, is tuned for stability inside a galaxy and untuned into growth and expansion outside one. The same stuff becomes aggressively turbulent dark matter, a misleading name because it contains no actual solid matter. Those googles of Planck scale actions are omnidirectional, so they can adapt in whichever direction needs a one-dimensional push at any given moment to maintain the structure of space. This is your legs dangling over the edge now. We're looking down into the uncomfortable abyss. But let's go in. Let's drop. If you accept what I'm saying, it means the entire structure of the universe is being recreated moment to moment at something like 10 to the power 240 Planck scale actions per second. The passage of time itself requires energy because maintaining empty space requires energy expenditure. But energy can't be created or destroyed, so what are we going to do? So then the logical question becomes terrifying. Will space and time run out of energy? Could it happen at just any moment? We're plummeting blind now. You can't even trust your senses in here. Their bias can be our undoing. Space and time aren't constant. They're a turbulent wind. Can everything just cease, stop blowing into total stillness? Like in the eye of a hurricane, or just blow itself out entirely? No trace left where all the energy is spent. Gone. Like a switch being flipped. One moment there's a beautiful, intriguing universe and we're embracing a loved one. The next, nothing. Everything's gone. Spent and dead. We're plummeting into the deep, uncomfortable unknown of terrifying what-ifs. And then, oh, there's a tug on our shoulders. The parachute has opened. We can see a safe landing. No, it cannot. That's the answer. It cannot just stop because we skip the damn 0th dimension. We can never know how energy or entropy truly work until we include it and embrace it. Energy is constantly being converted from a state of static to inaction. Entropy is the process that converts it back to static, eventually ready to reuse. Energy can't be created or destroyed, just converted from one state to another. So yes, maintaining space and time uses energy because static space is constantly being converted into adaptive turbulent pushes in time at the speed of E, which then reverts back to static once spent. Now we understand the mechanism of space-time curvature properly. This is a 2D metaphorical simplification. It's a very simplistic, childlike view of dimensions. And so is this. What's really happening is the 0th dimension is having to borrow static energy from itself to maintain these highly complex structures, borrowing at rates dictated by the inverse square law. The closest pay the highest price. The static 0th dimension appears outside of space, so it touches all points in the universe simultaneously, but the entire universe foots some of the bill for any action. If we rewind to moment 0, when only the 0th dimension existed and none of the others had grown, there was only a single point of infinite static potential. The first simplest action creates the forward push in time and a void in space, which fundamentally means infinite potential cannot manifest instantly. It'll take an eternity. Time and space will never run out, but I believe there's a fascinating convergence point of supreme stability that I'll point out later. And this is in line with the current findings of the James Webb Telescope, which has just confirmed all of these ideas I've been contemplating for decades. There are fully formed, mature galaxies that should not be there under our old model, because under this framework, time is exponential. Time now is literally not what it used to be. It is not linear. This means we don't have to rewrite the entire book of physics, we just accept the truth about space and time. So true 2D isn't a flat sheet, it's energy operating in two simultaneous directions, like a pair of entangled photons to tug of war between 2 points. Entanglement is what we get when we give a 0 2 dimensions. A static point appears in 2 distinct places. The 0 dimension exists outside time, touching every point in the universe simultaneously, evidenced again by this field. Electromagnetism creates tension between 2 areas in that vector field of entangled static potential. A photon emission is like stretching a rubber band between 2 points and then letting go. A magnetic field is the stretch lines as we pull the fabric of space in 2 directions. Entanglement is the medium the universe uses to broadcast the need for adaptation. The video we're looking at tries to explain this through folded higher dimensions, and that's mathematical hallucination dressed up as physics. 3D action is when you add a helical twist across that 2D strain, the stable vortex that we call matter. And if you don't believe me, the receipts are literally in your own body, so we can use those as a metaphor. Touch, your primary sense, mimics the connectedness of the 0 dimension. Something touches you, you adapt to its presence. The heart, beat, rest, beat, rest. The stabilised pulse of time, that's E in action. Your shoulder, omnidirectional flow away from that pulse, like the flow of time. Elbow, energy folds back, entangling 2 points together, creating tension, flow. Then a wrist, we've got bifurcated bones that allow us to rotate 180 degrees backwards and forwards. A vortex, it's mimicking the creation of mass and gravity. We all follow the same rules. We don't need a hadron collider. Evolution had to obey the same physics. It's the compartmentalization trap that blinds us to it. And a quick aside before somebody misses the point. None of this is me denying science. This is me reframing it without perceptual bias or compartmentalization. If anyone watches this and concludes, oh great, I knew gravity was all wrong, so the world's flat and climate science is a load of old bunk too. No, just go and check the climate scientists' methods. You don't get to dismiss something just because adapting to it will inconvenience you. That's literally the entire problem this whole series is trying to solve. Embracing an adaptive reality. It is a difficult balance because the evidence I'm presenting lives in reality, where historically evidence must be presented in the abstract first, mathematically, as an internally consistent proof. So which way is correct? If we remove compartmentalization and embrace an adaptive reality, then mathematics fundamentally lacks the scope or the tools to define it. Adaptation is the point to everything. Good, evil, heaven and hell, all forces, evolution, free will, imagination, consciousness, it's all adaptation. Adapting how you think to this framework is very difficult.
All exposed without any resistance. There's no need to cut into these objects to see inside the creature, because inside and outside are not protected categories anymore. They were simply artifacts of limited perspective. This is the first truly unsettling lesson of dimensions. The way that our world works, we think of using force to invade, but when you start thinking in the level of dimensions, you don't need any kind of force. You can simply bypass all of those defense mechanisms. Think of it like trying to use a wall to stop a ghost. It'll simply just go through the wall, like that resistance didn't exist in the first place. If a three-dimensional being turns the hat of a two-dimensional being over, there's now no way for that two-dimensional being to ever get that hat back in place. To make things more unsettling, a three-dimensional being could perform surgery on a two-dimensional creature without ever breaking its skin. The organs of the two-dimensional creature would simply disappear without any force or resistance. From the lower dimensional point of view, this would feel like magic or divine intervention or reality malfunction.
You literally can't have two-dimensional creatures. I mean, this is like... I know... Take it with a pinch of salt, but... It's using nonsense to prove... nonsense.
The same logic then applies to imprisonment. So in 2 dimensions, drawing a square around a creature is a perfect prison. There's no up, no down. That boundary is absolute. But to a 3-dimensional being, the prison isn't just broken, it's wholly irrelevant. One step over the line and everything is, well, non-existent. Nothing about the square has changed, by the way. The rules just stopped applying. And I want to be clear, this is not a metaphor. This is how dimensions work.
No, it is a metaphor. It's how they work in maths. Maths is a metaphor.
Now, with that in mind, consider the uncomfortable implication. Our own sense of physical laws only feel absolute because we're trapped inside them. But before we go on, there's something about mental health that we don't talk about enough. Your physical looks quietly shape how you feel, even...
Something kind of ironic about having a mental health advert in something that's encouraging people to have bad mental health and to focus on appearances, perceptual bias.
We live in 3 dimensions: length, width, depth. From this, we get volume and mass. This is the first dimension where knots can exist. A string can loop around itself without passing through itself. Constraints feel real here because there's no higher spatial direction available to resolve them. This is why 3-dimensional problems feel permanent. A wall blocks you, a body confines you, a prison cell feels inescapable. Every solution that we imagine is still forced to obey the same geometry. And even in our futuristic fantasies, they reveal this limitation. What's the most futuristic mode of transport that you can think of? A lot of you, I'm going to guess, said flying cars, right? It's what comes to my mind first. That alone reveals the fundamental limitations of only thinking in 3 dimensions. Every futuristic form of transport we have is simply finding a way to bypass 2-dimensional congestion by exploiting the 3rd dimension. Subways go under, planes go over. All these different inventions do is bypass the 2-dimensional traffic. It doesn't free us from the limitations of time and space. So far, physics feels strict, but they're understandable. Everything has a physical limit that we cannot break, no matter how far ahead we think. However, this feeling completely falls apart once you start going higher. The 4th dimension arrives in 2 forms, and both are destabilizing. The first is time, and not time as the poetic passing of events that we conceptualize it to be, but as a coordinate. In this understanding, you don't simply exist somewhere, you also exist sometime. And in a way, we already experience this dimension. A location without a time is meaningless to us. Meet me at the library is incomplete without at noon. Seen this way, you're not a body moving through time, you're a 4-dimensional object stretched across it, a world line. Your birth, every action you've ever taken, and your death are not events that you approach, they're locations on a structure you already occupy. You experience this structure one slice at a time, the way a 2-dimensional being would experience a 3-dimensional object passing through its plane. This alone quietly breaks our intuition about freedom. If time is a dimension, then your life isn't unfolding, it already exists as a shape from start to finish. You are predefined. But the more disturbing interpretation of the 4th dimension is spatial. A 4th spatial dimension does to us exactly what we do to 2-dimensional worlds. A 4-dimensional observer wouldn't see your surface, they would see everything. Organs, blood flow, digestion, tumors, neural activity, your entire body exposed without any form of penetration. The same you can conduct surgery on a 2-dimensional object without any injuries is the same way a 4-dimensional object can on you. Now to you, this would feel like a violation without cause, a lawless intrusion. To them, it would feel as trivial as placing your finger in the middle of a circle. If a 4-dimensional object entered our world, we would not perceive it as a whole object. We would only be able to observe its cross-sections, a point appearing from nothing and disappearing from nowhere, growing into a sphere, shrinking, vanishing, a ghost, not because it's transparent, but because it's incomplete. At this level...
This is where dimensional delusion actually becomes dangerous. I mean, saying time is a spatial coordinate, you're basically saying everything is predetermined. Free will is an illusion. Your life is already written, so you don't have to bother. It's utter nonsense. Beautiful, mathematically self-consistent, utterly nonsensical. One day we can look back at this the way we look back on flat earth theory. Oh, hang on. A quick thought experiment. Let's take the 4th dimension as it's presented here. Imagine 2 earths, and we're going to fold them in 4D so they can pass through one another like ghosts in the same 3D space. Now inject reality into the image. The fizz of space-time, that dark energy, has to now flow in 6 simultaneous directions, instead of just 3 to maintain both bodies. but the speed of time is capped by E, same as the speed of light. Fizz of dark energy can only fizz so fast, and only so much can be borrowed from surrounding space via the inverse square law. So the gravitational constant, which metaphorically equates to 1 over e to the power 3, because we're splitting one action into 3 directions at the speed of e, would have to become 1 over e to the 6 to maintain both structures. Each compounding Google pulse maintaining your body now does 10 times the work, and space-time can't sustain that load without consequence. When I say 1 over e to the 3, these are dynamic causal equations, subject to the turbulent adaptation of time. We're overlaying a simple general pattern on reality, the same way we overlay simple mathematical dimensions over space-time that don't fully explain, because they don't account for curvature. With a tenfold gravity increase, both planets' diameters would shrink immediately by dozens of kilometres. The atmosphere would crush to a high-pressure film hundreds of degrees, evaporating any ocean that hasn't already been subjected to the tectonic rips of the volcanic hellscape. The moon would spiral towards each Earth, ripped into pieces along the way, then rain down on what's left. If the same thing occurred at a universe-wide level, nothing could ever exist. At best, you'd have a bunch of black holes that just keep falling into one another. That's why imaginary 4D space can only exist in our imagination or on a mathematician's notebook. Reality does not give 2 shits about our perception biases, or even 1. This is why we see no evidence of higher dimensions, these 4-dimensional creatures warping in and out of space. They're not hiding, they simply can't be projected outside of our imagination without causing systemic collapse. And the hard work isn't learning new physics, it's rewriting the textbook when it appears to be nonsensical. It is impossible for us to build and construct anything without these dimensional rules, but it's not compatible when we are building a universe. And physicists have it worse. They've been trained to dive so deep into abstraction, they confuse pattern matching with understanding. It's a sort of elitism at play, demanding mathematical proof of any idea when only a handful of people on the planet could even understand the proof. The number of people that can actually understand that level of complexity gets even more finite, which invites ego into the picture, like Hawkins becoming the official authority on reality for so long. It's like insisting that zoologists have mastery over the art of cloud animal spotting rather than mastery over actual animals. Which is strange because physicists, unlike mathematicians, know maths isn't a perfect tool. It's flawed. It allows highly accurate metaphor, but it is still metaphor. They just tend to overestimate its functionality due to the rare level of abstract intelligence required to master it. The skill earns the deference. The deference invites the delusions. The universe is way cleverer than us. It gets around the 3D limit using fractal and factorial nesting. A quick dive into factorials. I'll give you one of the most perfect 3D numbers in existence. It's 153 in base 10. So that's our standard base. We can derive it in multiple ways. Sum the cube of its digits. 1 cube plus 5 cube plus 3 cube equals 153. Or sum the first 5 factorials. 1 factorial plus 2 factorial plus 3 factorials plus 4 factorial plus 5 factorial equals 153. Or take any multiple of 3 and repeatedly cube, then sum the digits. It will converge to 153. It's a kind of universal backstop that we can even tie to acceleration over time. If we multiply it by 12, you get 1836, which is the proton to electron mass ratio. Now, why would we multiply by 12? Because 12 has innately rotational properties, which is why base 12 is used for circles, degrees, and seconds. 12, as its own digits suggest, has a 1:2 ratio built in over time, just like pi. So multiplying by 12 adds rotation to 153. We'll go deeper into the metaphors that these numbers are showing us in the next episode. And there seems to be no equivalent irreducible backstop number in any higher dimension, which is why the universe has to get creative. After 3 dimensions, you don't get to add a 4th Euclidean dimensions. You start over at 0, 1 order higher, like Russian dolls, factorials. Once we have space, 0 dimension, time, 1 dimension, light or electromagnetism, the 2nd dimension, and matter, which is the 3rd dimension, we need to get matter reproducing, mimicking the fizz of dark energy all over again. So inside a star, hydrogen atoms get excited until their electrons pulled inwards, and they become a mature, ripe, reproductive neutron, back to 0. So then many suitors come along, rubbing their protruding electrons against her, but she's fussy. Then the right one arrives. He penetrates with his electron. She releases hers into his orbit in a quivering burst of energy, bonding energy. This is the strong nuclear force, the big O for baryons, otherwise known as nuclear fusion. When a male and female bond together for life, this is the fractal effect that we're mimicking, forever in physical proximity, adapting to whatever the universe throws at them together. Yes, I'm using simplification through metaphor, and I'm usually way classier. I personally have a problem with the concept of an electron as it currently stands. Every proton has an area of potential where an electron can appear. When we measure where that electron is, we can never know everything about it because of the wave function collapse. Every electron we measure is exactly alike. Physicists have even speculated that maybe there's only one very busy electron in the entire universe. And because of this waveform collapse, there could be infinite parallel universes to explain it. I'm a big fan of Occam's razor. Go to the simplest solution. It makes more sense to me that these areas of potential around a proton are maintained by the most abundant particles in the universe, the neutrino. There are trillions of them passing through you right now. The act of turning on the measuring device for the electron, which is itself an electromagnetic action, creates a reaction. One of those neutrinos adapts to the change in space by momentarily quantizing up to an electron level, then back down again, collapsing the waveform immediately after. That's why they all appear the same, perform the same action, you get the same reaction every time. Electrons are reactions, not particles. The same logic applies to the double slit experiment. We have a gun firing electrons at photopaper, which is impossible. It's firing a wave of energetic potential, like that around a proton. With the detectors switched off, it creates a wave pattern on the photopaper as expected. With the detectors on, we're introducing a 2-dimensional electromagnetic strain around the slits, which then creates a reaction, focusing the potential area where the electrons can hit the photopaper down to the slits themselves. So you see 2 distinct areas on the paper then. Is it me? It probably is, to be fair. For decades I thought I was bonkers because I've always struggled to see the cause of the confusion. As a quick thought experiment, let's just prove how thoroughly insane I am. In the video that we're looking at, like everywhere else, dimensions are simple straight line things. If they are actually real, we should fully understand the cause of their effect. What causes them to exist? Come on, you should be able to answer that question. If you fully understand dimensions, you should be able to answer what causes them. It's a simple question. If you find yourself saying, oh, there's no cause, they're just there, then that's impossible. Nothing can exist without a cause. The only logical conclusion is that our mind projects them over reality, which is a perceptual bias. Take this wireframe cube. If every side equals 1, to define 3D space, then 1 to the power 3 collapses to 1 mathematically. 3D space cannot exist in these simple terms. The projection collapses on contact with itself. So yes, people will argue, oh, you have to add a constant like meters, then it doesn't collapse. This is like saying a collapsing house will never fall over if we put these struts around it. Why not just fix why the house is collapsing in the first place? Am I really the insane one for thinking like this? Sometimes it feels like it. Jumping back to our proton and neutron lovers, there's a constant called the fine structure constant, which is about 1/137, and it shows up in electromagnetic field strength. Now the strong force, the bonding force, is 137 times stronger, which means it's arguably equal to a dimensionless one. The 0th dimension hath reproduced. And why 137 specifically? Is it a coincidence that the ratio between each digit, 1 to 3 to 7, roughly increases by e, the speed of time? Or not? Come up with a better idea. There are no coincidences in maths, just patterns that we haven't deciphered yet. So wait for the next episode. Our proton-neutron couples form communities. Communities form into complex elements that complement each other. Eventually, that galactic seed spreader collapses under its own weight, supernova, and the cycle resets at a higher level again. A pair of hydrogen migrants wander into an oxygen community, covalent bond themselves into it, and water happens. Genuinely, one of the most remarkable substances in the universe. I'll try not to go full water geek, but it has a 0-dimensional static charge, +2 at one end, -2 at the other. Molecules chain into strong 1D structures. It enables surface tension and capillary action, stronger than the force of gravity. Trees couldn't grow without it. We have 3D vortex behaviour, helical rotation under high voltage, the famous water bridge experiment, which I've got an example of that, hang on.
So it consists, as you can see, of 2 beakers of pure water. And down here I have a power supply, as you can say, to supply very high voltage, more than 10,000 volts. So the trick is to move this one very slowly apart and then see what happens. So I'm pulling slowly here, and you can see there's kind of a rope-like structure forming now. It's almost 1 centimeter. And if you have really good eyes, you can sense that there's movement from the red to the black beaker and from the black back again. So my understanding is that it's like 2 spirals, 2 vortices running in opposite directions.
What we aim to find is...
So then we get to 2D bifurcation. Water is actually 2 different liquids depending on temperature with 2 different densities. It's structural bifurcation to regulate temperature, like electrons reacting, bifurcating photons to self-regulate. It exists in all 3 states on Earth's surface, solid, liquid and gas. And the average mammalian body temperature sits at the phi point of water. So DNA's double helix couldn't form without those vortex properties that we saw. Once you put a rocky planet of the right size with plenty of water in place, life shows up fast, within millions of years. Amino acids, self-replicating protein building blocks, start forming in nebulae before solar systems have even finished stabilizing. The universe is eager for life, eager for higher dimensions to stabilize the lower ones. It's like adding a 3rd leg to a 2-legged stool. Life is the most efficient way to disperse the most energy through the most complex dimensional actions, the most stability. Now, water is a 3-dimensional molecule that now has extra dimensional properties. That's the tricky thing to get our heads around. Let's go back to the video for the last section that we need on higher dimensions.
Physics don't explode yet, but it does give us a glimpse. It shows us that everything that we think is protected on a fundamental level simply isn't. Now, the 4th dimension doesn't feel dangerous at first. It feels abstract. It almost feels philosophical. It's something you can gesture towards without letting it touch you. But abstraction is only a shield until the structure begins to assert itself. Once you follow the consequences instead of the metaphor, the 4th dimension becomes the point where physics stops acting like a barrier and starts behaving like a suggestion. In 3 dimensions, not their
Because it is a suggestion. Maths is metaphor.
permanent. They are a physical fact. A string can trap itself. A constraint forms because there is no available direction for escape, and this is why our headphones getting tangled feels so frustrating. The problem isn't the string itself, it's the space. The moment you introduce a 4th spatial dimension, knots lose their meaning. A knotted shoelace lifted into 4 dimensions simply slides around itself and falls apart. Nothing's breaking, you're not cutting the string. The knot just doesn't resist. It never truly existed. It was just an illusion created by insufficient room for it to explore. And this is a recurring pattern in higher dimensions. What feels like structure from below turns out to be congestion, a limit of space, and not an impossibility. This is why certain objects cannot exist properly in our universe. Take the Klein bottle, for example. In 3 dimensions, it looks like a bottle that intersects itself as if it were carelessly designed, but in 4 dimensions, it doesn't intersect at all. It has no inside and no outside. The contradiction isn't in the objects, it's in the space that we're forcing them into. When mathematicians draw a Klein bottle in 3 dimensions, they're not showing you what it is. They're showing you what happens when something real is crushed into an insufficient world, a thing that is deeply unsettling. Reality, as we know it, may be full of objects and processes that only look paradoxical because we're seeing broken projections of them and not the full thing. By the time we reach the 5th dimension, physics begin to betray its own assumptions. In the 1920s, Theodor Kaluza rewrote Einstein's equations of gravity using 5 dimensions instead of 4. This mathematical experiment was designed to ask one simple question. What would happen if space-time had one more spatial direction? The result was unexpected and deeply uncomfortable. The equations split cleanly into 2 parts. One part described gravity exactly as Einstein had formulated it. The other part described electromagnetism with perfect precision. Light, magnetism, electric fields, all of it emerged automatically. In 5 dimensions, electromagnetism is not a separate force, it's geometry. This means something profound and very difficult to sit with. Light may not be fundamental. It may be a vibration in a direction that we can't access, a ripple in a dimension that we don't experience. From our perspective, gravity and light feel distinct because we are confined to a slice of reality that fractures them apart. However, from 5 dimensions, they could very well be the same phenomenon, just viewed from different angles. At this point, physics stops feeling like a set of rules and starts feeling like a shadow. Geometry also begins behaving strangely here. As dimensions increase from 1 to 5, the volume of a unit sphere grows. Space becomes more generous. The sphere reaches its maximum volume in the 5th dimension, and this is the peak, the moment where space is the most efficient at containing things. Then, something breaks. At 6 dimensions, volume starts to shrink. Now, this is counterintuitive in a way that cannot be visualized. You are adding more room, and yet objects occupy less of it. Spheres become smaller relative to the space that they inhabit. Packing becomes inefficient, and distance itself loses meaning. This is the point where string theory becomes unavoidable. String theory is often framed as speculative, but mathematically it's an act of desperation. When physicists try to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, the equations just refuse to behave. Probabilities stop adding up to 1, and the math collapses into nonsense. Unless the universe has 6 extra spatial dimensions, and not metaphorically, literally. These dimensions are not extended like ours. They're compact, curled into complex shapes known as Calabi-Yau manifolds.
Right, okay, to unpack that, the video says all of Einstein's space-time equations and the electromagnetic equations show up at 5 dimensions. True, not because EM is 5-dimensional, it's because we've crossed that 3D boundary and the fractal has reset. Another glitch in the tool telling us what to look for while we build silly ideas around it instead. The 5th dimension is therefore just a higher order echo of the 2nd, compounded by the fact the 5th dimension can't exist without the 4th, which then mimics space-time. It's the same with the 8th. We would have rotated around twice and we would reach a point of stability. Now, reproductive algorithms, something we know quite well. One-dimensional exponential growth at the speed of e does not create a straight line. It creates something far more complex. If we take the simplest algorithm, exponential growth with restriction, like the population growth of rabbits. Rabbits reproduce prolifically, but they can't reproduce as prolifically as bacteria. The environment puts a cap on them. Resource limits are the restriction. We already know reproductive 0D energy is capped by E. Let's map this reproduction rate. It's something called the logistic map. Once the reproduction rate climbs past 3, you get period doubling bifurcations, and then chaos. The value begins bouncing between 2 values, and then multiple values, and then chaos. If we turn it sideways, it looks remarkably like a tree, and that's not a coincidence, it's a metaphor again. One-dimensional exponential growth pushing against the restrictive gravity, branching and branching, again and again, fruiting. The Big Bang in slow motion, providing shelter, fruit and drinking water. The 4th physical dimension is a tree growing exponentially against gravity. Adaptation in action, the diagonal counter to a restrictive force. So hopefully you're kind of understanding what I mean when I'm talking about a fractal reality. We've seen the same patterns repeating everywhere. And when another dimension emerges, it must contain a version of the lower dimension, even if that is inverted in both function and aspect. Oh, I've got a pair of lungs. The tree converts CO2 to O2, and our lungs convert O2 to CO2. Hopefully you're starting to see, and it's all starting to get a little bit clearer. So we have the growth of space, and the restriction on the growth of space is the speed of light. Then we have one-dimensional growth, and the restriction on that is gravity. Now, the speed of light is created by the corresponding growth of electromagnetism. Gravity is created by the growth of matter, and the same pattern repeats and repeats. So after we've been through 0, 1, 2, 3, then the entire fractal repeats again. So we have this larger hole repeating here, but can you see it's completely cut off? So there are no coincidences in maths. These metaphors aren't metaphors, they're actually real. They're showing us how it actually works. So 0, 1, 2, 3, this is why the fractal repeats at 3, because now we have a smaller version of the same, and it keeps spiraling ever down. As each dimension appears, they get physically smaller. To go even further, we need another mathematical metaphor. Past the 3D reset point, we're mapping 0 and 1 dimensional dynamics again, So we can use a quaternion, which is a special 4D number, so that's just across the 3D boundary, and we can use E as our scalar and map the equivalent of that logistic map for reproduction. I genuinely recommend running the Python script for yourself, so you know I'm not full of it. So, there we go. So we've got badum 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 badum. It's like a cardiovascular rhythm, as if reality is exerting itself to create the dimensions you can see emerging, the orthogonal pattern of a static square and another rotating through it, which is two-dimensional energy. Reproduction leads to geometry. There we go, we have our two electromagnetic fields. And then we can go on. So we've got the same thing. Badum 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 badum. We can see three rotating fields emerging. Helical rotation needed for matter. Smash it apart and you'll briefly see three quarks, the dying eddies of a complex structure, all starting from nothing and moving forward. You can see the relationship, the tension between static and in motion. So if we start from nothing and move forward, this is completely intuitive. But then you have to take a moment to admire the mathematical skill required to create a model that then predicts this behaviour from the opposite end of causality, and then later prove it in a hadron collider. This is the equivalent of mathematically proving the existence of the dinosaurs before a single bone has been seen. The part that nearly stopped my heart was that rhythm that you can see. It quickens and slows as the geometry emerges, like the universe is exerting itself to create that geometry. That geometry is emergent. It will always form. Now, I'm not religious, but it's like watching the literal heartbeat of God. The cardiovascular rhythm exists to maintain temperature and pressure. And there it is, emerging from a simple algorithm, same as inside a star. And properly chilling, when the human heart goes into VFib, it follows this exact bifurcating chaos pattern. And we know it's real because it's how defibrillators actually work. They wait for these gaps to give the best chance of returning to a sinus rhythm. This pattern also appears in how our eyes respond to light. We are walking, talking logistic maps. And so are our tree brothers and sisters, minus the walking and talking, obviously. This Calabi-Yau manifold hallucination, the video says dimensions over 5 fold up into these manifolds, and the entire universe is made of these tiny crumpled spaces. It's the mathematical equivalent of finding a nice pattern in your bathtub mould and declaring it as the foundation of architecture. For instance, let's look at our own bodies again. Legs have 5 joints. They're designed to push away from your reproductive 0 point with maximum force. They can't fully curl back inwards because the ankle won't allow it. Arms have got 6 joints designed to pull inwards towards your heart. Your stable reproductive point, maximum force when embracing. So we are basically neutrino shaped. 2 vectors pushing away from an unstable entangled 0 and 2 folding back towards a stabilised entangled 0. Arms are akin to the strong nuclear force echoed at a higher order. That's why we have the urge to hug those we've entangled with. It's the same fundamental physics, and it gives nuclear arms a sweeter ring. Hugging your kids isn't sentimental, it's installing the need to seek healthy, strong force bonds. Critical for mental health, and that's not my opinion, it's the laws of physics through a complex lens of layered metaphor. So at legs we're at 5, at arms we're at 6, and now at our heads, all vectors of action have folded inwards, mimicking the Calabi-Yau manifold pattern. Instead, you've got 5 holes letting space-time in and 5 senses. 0-dimensional touch to adapt to an immediate presence. We've got 1-dimensional taste and smell to find the matter that we can safely rotate through ourselves. It's nature's workaround to avoid 1/e⁻⁶ collapse. We've still got matter rotating through itself. So then we have 2D hearing. finding the direction for immediate adaptation. Then we have 3D sight, 2 2D images, a 3D projection of the world. Recent research has found that when you start to think, your mind builds plank-like structures, then boards, and then 3D structures, all the way up to 11D. It's the same fractal, the same pattern, screaming at us. All of that is going on inside here, all that higher dimensional activity. Now look at proteins from AlphaFold. The same pattern screaming at us. 1D strings becoming 2D beta sheets and then becoming 3D helixes. We've even got the 3 rotational fields, as we saw in the quaternion, mimicked at a different level of complexity. If we look at a more complex protein, we can start to see ribs forming, where their job is to control the absorption and emission of water, the same way electromagnetic fields control the emission and absorption of photons. The next thing to tackle is, why is the golden ratio everywhere? And the hint is kind of in this diagram. It's the only ratio you can use to add dimensions. This might just seem like a mathematical curiosity, but it gets much deeper when you bring flow and feedback into these simple sums to make a complex self-stabilizing system, as in that diagram. Phi is intrinsic to any reality where dimensions grow over time. And for anything to flow, there must be a relationship with time. In the Fibonacci sequence, we see a time-based pattern. We take the past, we add the now, and then we get the next. The future is continuously built by adding the present to its predecessor. We've already discussed, because effects like gravity and the speed of light, all our actions are eternally embedded into space-time, making space-time omniscient, because the present is the sum of all previous actions. It's the book of inescapable receipts. Our mortal lifespan is the actions that we choose to embed to tell the universe who we are. People that just abstract this truth away like it doesn't matter. So you can be as selfish and as horrendous as you want as a person, and there's no record. It doesn't matter. Now, weirdly, or maybe obviously, our bodies are proportioned according to the golden ratio, making us created in its image, created in the image of a raw manifestation of action. If you want to fold up a bifurcated, adaptive, 6-dimensional manifold fixed in 3D space, the golden ratio must be present to allow those dimensions to fold neatly so that they can still act. So what does that sentence actually mean in reality? To look at your arm. That's what it means, the joints and ratios. So in an adaptive reality, dimensions must grow over time. So they don't start at 6 and fold backwards. They start at 0 and build. It's just plain logic. We can't skip steps because they're inconvenient. We also have to understand that when dimensions grow, they are turbulent, unstable entities that require stabilization through restriction, like reproductive processes. And we see evidence of this unstable turbulence, unrestricted growth in, as we said before, dark matter. In areas with restricted growth, inside galaxies, we see an abundance of light, creating the restrictive speed of light. We see an abundance of stable matter, creating the restrictive speed of time, also known as gravity. These are adaptive feedback, not forces or just constants. All the properties of phi we marvel at are clues as to its true causality, emergence over time, and dimensional stabilization. So to truly understand phi and where it comes from, I know some people call it phi, but it will always be phi to me because phi sounds completely unimportant, and it's really important. So we need to understand what actions are fundamentally possible in the universe. First action is something is at rest, it's static. So then we can move away from a point of rest, or we can move towards a point of rest. Or we can move away and towards simultaneously at the speed of e, then that would be rotation. And then finally, you can create a twist between 2 points of rest. This is why we create the limit of 3 dimensions. That's all the actions that are possible. Any maths student will say, well, hey, all of those equal 1. Yes, our maths is 4-dimensional and Euclidean. Cause and effect does not apply. We need causal maths, where even reciprocals have consequences over time. So 1 divided by 1 isn't just 1, it's 1 gradually returning to a state of 0 over time, and a 0 to the power 1 void is emitted in the process. Standard maths doesn't track that. It doesn't need to. It doesn't need to keep track of zeros, but it should. If any mathematical action creates no reaction, then it is against causality. Mathematical actions have to also have consequences. Thinking otherwise is dangerous when thinking about defining reality. It's fine for accounting or stock taking or pattern matching, but not for the reality we live in. Let's apply action and equal reaction to create a total outcome. We are in an adaptive reality. Every reaction must account for every other action in the universe to some extent. They're all linked through the 0 dimension, so every other action is proportional to x. Now we can solve, and that gives us phi. So the cause of the golden ratio is action and adaptive reaction enabled by E, the natural harmonic that adaptive systems resonate to build further complexity, to build dimensions. By this logic, we should probably average around 9.17 hours of sleep across our lives, the phi point of action and rest, which is suspiciously close to what babies and old people actually need, humans in their least energetic phases. As new dimensions emerge, they stabilise the ones below. The dimensions 2 orders higher fully stabilise its lower counterpart. And why is that 2 orders? It's like the Fibonacci sequence. We're adding the 2 previous to gain the next. As the next emerges, it stabilises the lowest of the 2. So back to our diagram, as electromagnetism appears, it stabilises growth of space by creating a speed of light restriction. You don't just have to take me at my word on this, we can actually prove it. If you take the speed of light, 299,79458 meters per second, and we take away the meters because that is just a 90-degree rotation around the Earth, what we're left with is seconds, which is a base 12 system. So we can reinterpret that just as degrees. If we find the action to our reaction, we need to convert that 150.02 degrees into radians into a ratio of 1 to 2d over time. And what you get is 2.618 radian, which is phi squared. And if you want to get really accurate, if you take phi squared and then add phi cubed minus 1 times 10 to the minus 4, so again we've gone over that 3D threshold into 4D, so we're getting some 3-dimensional stabilization in there as well, because these dimensions are highly complex. And this is as close as we can get to a single page grand unification theory with any kind of elegance, because everything is in there that we need to know. Back to Quaternions, parallel universes, and how the mind actually breaks. Hopefully the dimensional emergencies we saw and the cardiovascular rhythm from that simple algorithm are making sense now. The heartbeat of the stabilized 0 dimension, the 1D motion both towards and away from static points, 1D rotation is that same respiration. It's the same we were seeing, the convergence to a static point and then rotating away. So Quaternions are great to help explain how we work. We're bigger on the inside than we are on the outside. We can hold an entire metaphorical universe in our mind, a vast, ever-expanding 3D space filled inside a tiny little 3D space. That is mimicking what the video says about Celebi-Yau manifolds. The space is small, but it's still big. Through us, the universe has found a workaround for that e to the minus 6 collapse. And that's not a small claim, just let it sit for a second. But, and this is the catch, dimensions can't hide. Any higher dimension still has to possess dimensions 0 through 3. It must drop an anchor in 3D space. There's no escape clause for that. That anchor would have to have a very complex shape, be able to warp and twist in incredible ways dictated by the golden ratio, the ratio of dimensional stability, capable of amazing ranges of motion that hint at its true higher dimensional nature. It might even have BO, bad breath, or a bad attitude. which means every sci-fi multiverse you've ever loved is geometrically impossible. We can't overlay infinite dimensions over one another. Time could not service them all. Universes that branch instantly with every choice. Our universe, very arguably, took 13.8 billion years to get here. A universe instantly appearing breaks the speed of light, breaks E, breaks everything. They say parallel dimensions are where constants are slightly different. Our constants aren't constants. They are structural ratios with built-in adaptability. They're the dimensional tuning forks in action, not ingredients in a recipe that can be used to mix up different batches of reality. There is only one universe. Treat parallel universes as a metaphor for the human experience itself. Each of us is a parallel perspective on the same one. To enter another universe, walk up to a stranger and have a conversation. Step inside their world. Job done. That might seem mind-numbingly mundane compared with all the sci-fi nonsense out there, but it can be genuinely rewarding. Now, this is the important part. How does the mind break? Quaternions let us actually see that. How does inversapience happen?
Location distributes nicely. In the language of linear algebra, 1, I, j, and k form a basis of our four-dimensional space, so knowing what our transformation does to them...
So there's our quaternion. We have one scalar, and then 3 imaginary and 3 real components, which gives us our special type of four-dimensional number. In our case, we used E as the scalar for our dimensional emergence. But this is fundamentally talking about hyperspheres, which is all abstract, but it allows us to create a metaphor.
Gives us the full information about what it does to all of space. Geometrically, a four-dimensional creature would be able to look at those 2 perpendicular rotations that I just described and understand that they lock you into one and only one rigid motion for the hypersphere. We might lack the intuitions of such a hypothetical creature, but we can maybe try to get close. Here's what the action of repeatedly multiplying by I looks like on our stereographic projection of the IJK sphere. It gets rotated into what we see as a plane, then gets rotated further back to where it used to be, though the orientation is all reversed now.
But that's it. When you get a push on one axis, the sphere flattens to start with, or it appears flattened in our space, and then push again and it inverts. Inside then becomes outside. If cause and effect were present, they'd be reversed too from the change in perspective. Everything that person then does is because of something outside themselves made them do it. They believe they have no choice. This forms the foundation of a revenge-based mindset. Only the actions of others matter. The inversapient is merely a settler of scores. But they lack the perspective to understand the causes of the effects they want settled. So internal accountability for their own actions becomes impossible. It can only be forced from the outside to flip them back into sapience. We're all like these hyperspheres. Anybody can be pushed into this inverted state on any single topic of conversation. Maths, physics, biology, culture wars, the shape of the earth, truly anything. The force of that push can just be the acceptance of a single comforting lie. The lie inverts reality around that topic. It inverts the cause of the effect. That's the push that rotates an axis of the hypersphere through 180 degrees. And that's when you're in trouble. You're forced to invert your model of reality so that nothing can contradict the lie that you've accepted. Sensory information backed by logic and rational thought that contradict the lie are just easily dismissed. The external is irrelevant. Only internal feelings matter. Anything that contradicts the lie feels wrong, so it must be wrong. The senses can be screaming survival warnings, acting as messengers for something that is wrong. But that just intensifies the fear response, making a person tighten their grip on that comforting lie. From that moment, the person is in terrible mental health. This is our prefrontal paradox from not understanding dimensions and understanding ourselves and what we are. This is the emergence of inversapience. Now, the mind normally tries to resist this push to invert, provided it can think critically. All of our accumulated knowledge gathered over a lifetime pushes back against those lies, because critical thinking is the restrictive force that stabilizes the mind. So when some inversapient idiot makes a statement like, beautiful, clean coal, someone with no knowledge of coal or mental fortitude has their mind easily flipped. But anybody with the tiniest amount of knowledge feels a flash of anger at such stupidity on open display. Because a lie is like a slap to the face. It's an insult to somebody's intelligence, to critical thinking itself, to moral resilience. To not tolerate stupidity and to not tolerate inversapience, to not suffer fools, these are traits of goodness. Stupidity is a choice that somebody makes. It's not a good choice. They should be encouraged to change it. And this is also why people can appear totally normal until one specific topic arises, then the prefrontal paradox kicks in and makes any discussion impossible. Throughout ancient and modern history, we see the same mistake repeating. Vast libraries burned, scholars purged and put to death. Libraries of Alexandria, Nazi Germany, even America today, the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Russians have seen an exodus of scholars because critical thinking is always the enemy of evil. So when an evil person sees someone smart, then they must be up to something, like making the world a better and less stupid place where evil can't thrive. We see it in strict extremist religions too. Once a person is educated, they ask critical questions. They maybe even question the motives of those in charge of the religion, the so-called gatekeepers of morality who often have no morals at all. There are even some religions that will end somebody for asking questions. Any system that cannot stand up to the scrutiny of being questioned and answer those questions will collapse. That is just a fundamental law of the universe. Bit of a classic example, the king who shoots the messenger. The messenger isn't the cause of the bad news, just the medium delivering the effect. The functional response is to thank them. Now the king can adapt. But an inversapient king thinks the universe must adapt to him. Will shoot any messenger that gives him bad news, because he has ownership of free will. Everyone else is just a figment. Statues of himself, names buildings after himself, surrounds himself with bots that tell him he's a wonderful genius. Anything to prove the lies he is telling himself are real. Anything to avoid that visit from the three ghosts. Past, present and future accountability. This isn't strength, it's the inability to handle reality. The strength displayed when violently lashing out to challenges of the delusion is the weakness. The king is too fragile to look at the world without inversion. Critical thinkers threaten that it's time to decide whether we want to create a world that defaults to critical thinking and truth, or inversapience, stupid lies and evil. Understanding dimensions helps in that decision enormously. The grand purpose, so this is the crux of it. Dimensions are not these silly straight line things we're taught to see. Look at the symmetry of reality, do it yourself. They interlock so perfectly. This does not come from abstract Euclidean projections. It's the flow of time surging from static potential at the speed of e, gaining complexity. From the nature of one-dimensional exponential growth, bifurcation must then occur, leading to electromagnetism, two-dimensional energy, and entangled static points. If growth is unchecked due to a lack of restrictive measures, we naturally create a helical twist. To create that restriction, gravity is that restriction on the flow of time, just as the speed of light is a restriction on the reproductive rate, closing the aperture through which static energy can reproduce, bringing it to a steady beat. The mechanism is simple. If 0 squared, two entangled points, are present, then a single moving void cannot be expelled during the reproduction process. Then the dimensional fractal resets at the 3D stage, and the same structure must bootstrap themselves again from nothing and grow to the next level. We see dimensions 0 to 3 nested again inside liquid water, critical for life. Water is matter with extra dimensional potential. Exponential growth over time then occurs from self-reproducing proteins into single-celled creatures, manifesting at a higher order again. Like the complex elements before them, they start bonding into multi-celled creatures to better adapt to their environment. Unstable radioactive matter destroys those protein structures, forcing them to evolve into ever more radiation-resilient variants. Self-repairing DNA structures emerge, the double helix. Trees erupt from the ground, against the pull of gravity, fine-tuning its effects while stabilising the fine structure constant through photosynthesis. Matter with a fourth dimension of action, resembling the first dimension it mimics and tunes, as we saw with the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. Creatures capable of moving in two simultaneous directions evolve, adapting to their environment to bring stability. Bodies bifurcated, allowing waveforms to be generated in order to move like the light waves they mimic. Also bifurcated into two genders, like a reproducing neutron and forward-pushing proton. Their purpose, to stabilise weak force triggering that causes radioactive decay, locally stabilising matter itself. Then comes abstract life, creatures with imagination, not just free will, the ability to predict entropy, to stabilise life itself. This is the grand purpose the universe has left for us. Not just guardians of the metaphorical Garden of Eden, but the terrifyingly enormous task of applying that across the galaxy and beyond, creating and tending to as much life as possible, bringing stability to the entire universe. We should not be thinking in terms of colonisation at all, and we just could not colonise Mars unless we can get there in under 2 days. And we're never going to achieve that level of advancement if we don't sort out this planet and ourselves as a species first. Hopefully we'll meet others along the way who can help, and the strange thing about that is they may look very, very similar, because like I've said, these things are emergent. And if there is one sort of universal law where one sentient species will not make contact with another, it would be to stay away until this harrowing, humbling realization is made. Unless a species fully understands dimensions, do not contact them. It is not extermination, telling lies and fighting like petty children. That's for idiot authoritarians. We can take the pattern deeper again into dimensions. With abstract creatures, we naturally organise into complementary groups. Knowledge is passed between generations. Less 0 and 1 dimensional space-time is lost in that way. Specialists evolve, creating jobs and trades, eventually evolving into 2D structures where people can rotate in and out of a company structure without it collapsing. It's like a slow-building supernova before we metaphorically burst free. Large societies become a fractal mimic of the humans inside them, the head, creating a government steer the general direction of adaptation, businesses, the organs that keep the bodies alive, and a myriad of specialist cells, each with specific tasks, maintaining that structure. The direction of causality, law 1, is that all things binary must grow in complexity over time, which is why binary-minded authoritarians must eventually give way to complex democracies. There is no exception to this rule. It is the law of the universe, and fighting against that is like King Canute trying to command the tides. The tide doesn't care about the words of the will of a binary-minded fool. It will wash over them and drown them. See authoritarian regimes around the world on the verge of collapse. I'm not inciting these things to happen, but they must happen because we need to grow as a species and come out of this simplistic time. It's just a law of the universe that we have to. Either we do it or we will go extinct. That's the end of this episode for now. Hopefully Dimensions feel a little less like spooky multi-dimensional fog that schools sold us, and more like beautiful, growing, adaptive cathedrals that are forged over time. Stick your questions in the comments, and if you need any extra clarification, let me know. Next time, we're going to ruin number theory, so prepare for that one. See you later!